off the music on the horizontal. So yes, here I am again, Kristen Jeffers. Hey to Matt over on Instagram. Please bring your questions. Otherwise, you get to hear me just talk about whatever's on my mind. But I love when folks come by and they bring questions. If you are on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube, and if you are on the actual StreamYard platform, as well as Instagram, if you put questions in the comment box, I can see those questions. But yes, this is a companion to me having my podcast. So if you have not magically listened to my podcast in any form, please listen to the podcast. In fact, I would most love for you right now. My biggest request, other than if you're on the horizontal platforms, you see scrolling on the bottom of the screen, I have a request to for patron. Uh, Patron is the primary way that I get a steady monthly income, as well as if you go live on you go live go paid rather on Substack. And there's you can always I have Venmo, I have Cash App, I have all the things. But of course, I'm a business too. If y'all haven't y'all remember, I'm a business. So you can book me for workshops, you can book me for speeches, and actually, if you want to come on the podcast, you can do that as well. Go over to calendly.com/Kristen Jeffers. And in fact, that's going to be my first link of the day, because I would love to have a conversation with you. And you don't have to be, I think some of you are like, well, Kristen, I'm not into urban planning. I'm not into all of that. This podcast, what I want to do with it and these platforms is to have a conversation with folks about where they come from, what they come from around place making. And that's why I called it defying gentrification, because for a lot of us, we're thinking about how things are more expensive. We're thinking about all the displacement, all the cultural changes that have been going on. And so I would absolutely love to have you be part of this conversation. So yeah, that's the link. What will happen is, don't worry, when you click the link, you're not just going on with me directly, and we're not going to just turn on the mic and record. Now, if you book with Calendly automatically starts recording the conversation. But if you don't want that conversation to be the main mic conversation, that's okay. There are parts of the Calendly form that you can fill out to make sure that I know what we're doing. So if you want to pre-call, if you want to come on the show directly, or if you want to do both, but you want to talk to me first, that's what we can do. Also, let me also put on here my Calendly. I do this on request, because one of the big questions that people have is like, oh, well, Kristen, you talked about, things are going rough and everything. Do you still do project teams? Do you still do panels? Do you still do public speeches? Absolutely. So the link that I just put on the screen right now, for those of you who are on the horizontal networks, and for I'm about to actually pin, I'm lifting up my phone here, and I'm going to pin my Calendly link so that we can connect. If there's a question you don't want to ask on this feed today, but I would love for you to ask any questions for the general public. But if you want to talk with me, work with me, be on the podcast. Let's see, Calendly. I'm forever spelling that name of that website wrong. So let me. And of course, those of you who are on Instagram, I'm waving at you so that I see you coming through. And I appreciate y'all. And I appreciate those of you all who are with me on the horizontal. I'm calling them the horizontal networks, because Instagram, of course, is vertical. I am so thrilled to be here with you. And yes, as I mentioned before, I'm putting this Calendly link on the screen. I still do this kind of work, but this is something I evaluate, and that is, these are my two complimentary ways that you can speak with me for an hour, with the expectation that we're going to have another project. So if you're just promoting your project, if you want to put it on the podcast, use the link. The Define Gentrification 101s is your link. If you want me to do a speech, panel, project team, workshop, this is your link. And then if you need career help, and of course, right now, a lot's going on. I know I have a lot of graduates and everything. I have a lot of other people, not unlike myself, who are shifting their focus, wanting to pivot, wanting to make a career change. Then I have a block of time, especially for you. And I'm going to put that up here on the screen as well. And this if you're watching on YouTube or in the comments. And of course, you're going to get an email when I send out the recap email for this. You will get these links to how to work with me. So yes, let me switch this over here. So this is a paid service. This is just about an hour and a half, depending. We may determine we need more time, but this is basically you sit down with me, you talk to me about what's going on. Like, it's a more personal version of what we are doing on these Ask Me Anything. Like, of course, you can bring any questions you want to the public. Otherwise, of course, you're going to hear me talk about whatever's on my mind. And I do have something on my mind today. So definitely, if you have questions, go ahead and get them in before I start kind of bringing forth the thing I want to talk about. That's going to be kind of the theme of today's conversation if you don't bring the questions. But I will take a moment, since we are in graduation season, and even if you don't decide to work with me, but definitely if you are still just off of campus and you feel safe enough to approach campus resources, I know that's fraught right now, especially if you're on campuses that are actively resisting against all of this student activism around Palestine. And even prior to that, there's a lot of campuses that are, unfortunately, campuses still exist that ignore Title IX, that ignore non-discrimination clauses for LGBTQ students. A lot of campuses and a lot of the ways we've had to operate, not just as students, but as faculty and staff, are not really welcoming to people who are Black, who are women, feminine leaning, queer people of all genders and sexualities, disability. Yes, many, that's another thing. ADA, a lot of campuses do have disability services. Some help, some do not. So, of course, many of you are figuring out like what you're going to do next. And so I like to usually write one letter a year where I talk about, my advice to students. And I'm going to make a note to maybe make my next email journal entry, as it were, about that. But let me take a moment about the journal entry, the newsletters. And so just a FYI for those of you who are getting to know what I'm doing now and how these production schedules and everything are working. Some of you that come back every week, you kind of know what's up. You kind of see what I'm doing and how I'm putting myself out here in the world. So as of this week, I am 100% a free agent. So I am no longer under contract with anybody but myself. So I am showing up to the world 100% as me. I am not speaking on behalf of any organization or any organizations I've worked for in the past. I am speaking on behalf of myself and my spiritual convictions. Yes. To the person who hearted me on Instagram, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a scary thing to be out here. And I think a lot of people think that I set out to be independent. Yes and no, because in a lot of ways, I set out to just be myself. I set out to create what I needed in the world. One of the things I said in yesterday's email, and I realized as I've been doing, especially when I was researching the last full podcast episode with Kristen Edwards, you should listen to it. I loved it. I loved talking with you, Christine. It was such a joy and such a pleasure. So thank you for coming by. And hopefully we'll do it again soon. Hopefully we'll do it in real life, or at least in the same plane. Not this is real life. Like, all of this is real life. That's one thing I've been working on as somebody who is home a lot. Now, I was out and about yesterday at the Black Joy Disco. Shout out to Black in Space and that whole crew and everybody here in DC that is committed to centering Black lives, trans lives, disabled lives, all of that. Thank y'all. We needed that. We needed that space. Because I realized growing up in North Carolina, we did not have a lot of now I grew up in the 1990s, and so by the 1990s we were getting a little bit better with centering like diverse books. But as you probably saw when Faith Ringgold passed away a few weeks ago, many of us were talking about Tar Beach. Tar Beach for many of us who were in elementary school in the 90s, especially the early 90s, when that book hit the scene, and it came out in 1991, and I was in kindergarten in 1991. And of course, I've talked about being part of that sort of second Sesame Street generation and just all of that. But that was the thing. The Sesame Street people and the monsters and the characters were all in New York City. And so that was being piped into my home in North Carolina that looked a little bit different. Now we have a downtown area. We have the street grid and we have the taller buildings and we have sort of the architecture and everything. But then we mostly have low density single family homes. And of course, in North Carolina, we don't necessarily do suburbia in the same way. For many people years and years ago were homesteading on those acre plots of land. People had their gardens. People were like knocking on doors. Maybe we didn't have the sidewalk, but we weren't afraid. We didn't need the sidewalk to walk down to our neighbors. We didn't need certain infrastructure. We just did. Like the housing form did not keep us from being neighbors. Even like, and now, yes, we do. Many of us have front porches, but some of our neighbors actually have stoops instead of front porches. At least when I was growing up on Rocket Street, and even now, the neighborhood my mom has bought into, technically she has more of like a stoop thingy. It's kind of quirky. If you've seen the house, you kind of get the idea of what we're working with. Let me wave to some more of my Instagram followers joining me. And actually, I'm going to take down my Calendly and just talk with you a little bit. Yeah, and just having the having just it just didn't take us, but the books, the media that was being piped into my home, even Nickelodeon. Like now, yes, we had my brother and me in the mid 90s, and that was kind of a truer that was probably the first time on TV I saw what my world looked like. The show was set in Charlotte. And of course, now I'm realizing, like, back now, like, Amanda Seales, of course, has talked about, like, her whole life on that show and everything else. But let's taking it back to the 90s, like, that representation of a child that looked a lot like myself, uh, and in a family that looked like myself, and of course sister, they were in Detroit. My aunt was in Detroit, so that was a little bit closer connection. So gradually I'm starting to see representations of myself in the media, but the overarching representation was everything was in another place. And if I was going to be like, to be a good person meant that I needed to live somewhere else. Where I was living wasn't enough. This was the era that hip hop was taking over the airways, and the Atlanta scene hadn't quite hit the national scene yet. We were still being influenced by New York. I'm listening to Rhapsody's new album, Marlena. She's from Spring Hope, which is a smaller town in eastern North Carolina. And yeah, like that was what was getting piped into our houses on some land. Nice little 3 bedroom, or in some cases 3 bedroom, 2 bath. Some people was 3 by 1s. Just our parents and our grandparents were just felt proud of making it enough to have, in many cases, homes with indoor plumbing, because we weren't that, like, my both of my parents lived in homes at one point that did not have indoor toiletries, so they went outside. And of course, my grandparents pretty much spent most of their adult life like that. It wasn't, at least with my mom, I know that my grandparents were probably like my age, if not even older, before they lived in a home that had that capability. So getting those homes, getting any house with the proper plumbing, the proper HVAC, something that they could call their own, something that nobody was going to take, something that nobody was going to try to encroach on, that was an achievement. But I know for me, all of those things just mixed together. And all of those things made me think, okay, I need to go somewhere else. And yeah, it does help. Now, I will say this, before all of my the few urbanist people that still rock with me, even after I've been making some of these statements about not the design form not being the whole story. Yes, it's nice to have things in walking distance. Living in this apartment right now is a dream. To walk out this door and to be less than 5 minutes from two CVS's, one Safeway, and then if I really wanted to have fun and take a good little walk, I'm 30 minutes. I'm a 30-minute walk from Harris Teeter. I've never been able to walk to nobody's Harris Teeter in my entire life. And of course, we could go into the dregs of Harris Teeter and how that was one of the first places I noticed that businesses, if they just didn't like who was coming there, they would try to move towards the clientele that they liked. And this is the South, and this is America. So of course, it's black folks that they don't like seeing, and they're moving closer to the white folks. That's just facts. And as someone who is still black, might be a little lighter on the skin tone rate, but it's still black enough. And trust me, when you are in situations where it is all white all the time and ain't no drop of color enough, you feel that. That was one of the reasons I definitely left the Midwest, even though it was all right. Like, I was definitely making my way, but there was definitely, I felt an energy that was so different than what I've experienced down south. Like, it's so funny because people be trying to move away from folk, and then we ended up in the same places. Vehicles. The funny thing about being in a car dependent place is you can try to move away from walkability. Like, you can criminalize walking all you want to, but it's interesting because you underestimate that anybody could drive to your business. Let's pause about that. Anybody could drive to your business. Like, yeah, there's definitely barriers to entry, but somebody could get somebody to give them a ride. Even if you don't have a car, you knew somebody that had a car. Or even better, the bus does still run. And anybody can walk up on your business even still. Those of you who knew my dad in his latter days, after he had had his big car wreck, and I won't get into the whole details of that, but Daddy knew that the bus headways weren't going to exactly run on time for him. At the time, Greensboro Transit Authority buses, GTA, the headways were 30 minutes, sometimes even an hour. And of course, I don't think we had Sunday service yet. So my dad would just walk. And my dad would walk sometimes like 4 or 5, even sometimes 10 miles a day round trip. Dad would walk from his house just south of like Florida Street and Freeman Road. For all of you who know Greensboro geography, that's where we were. Florida, behind that corner, the shopping center at Florida Street and Freeman Road. And he would walk the mile or so up those little hills up in the downtown. Freeman Mill Road at that point used to be U.S. Highway 220. It was decommissioned. It's no longer, it doesn't carry that, and neither does Randall Road. But still, we're talking about, when we talk about Strohs, my dad was walking up and down Strohs with no sidewalks off it, and he was walking wherever he needed to go. So ultimately, watching my dad do this, watching my dad interact with the urban landscape in a certain way, and of course, many of you who have been following me for almost all of these almost 15 years know about how he was the first person to put me on a bike, and how he was part of me being interested in buildings and building typology. And of course, I have other uncles who have done maintenance labor. I have an uncle who's a brick mason. One of his brothers is a brick mason, and other brothers and cousins, nephews of his did maintenance and construction labor. Black men in the South doing construction labor, lighter skinned black men in the South doing construction labor, including their grandfather. So that is the legacy, and that is what I knew, and that is when this whole platform has been rooted in its medianness. This is missing in the media. This is missing in my textbook. This is what we need to bring to the world. And so now realizing that and now recentering on that, the last few years especially has been really rough and really tough on my thought process. All this emphasis on people deserving to ride transit versus just providing as a public service, that's just grieves my soul. This idea, even affordable housing to me, is not enough. I want us to start thinking about guaranteed housing. And in fact, um, since I'm not seeing any questions, and I think I'm on the comments feed. So I mean, yeah. So I'm gonna actually post a link, and of course, these two links will be in the um, live stream notes. I wanted to highlight what it means. Some of you who are doing housing work, of course, y'all know about Housing First. The idea literally is just giving folks a house. Just give people a house. Like, don't make them do. And this is from the let's see, the organization is National Alliance to End Homelessness, uh, which they're like, just give people a house, give people housing, give people shelter, no strings. Let them do whatever they need to do in it. If they're gonna abuse substances, let them then feel that out for themselves. But you can't. The way the shelter system is set up right now, you cannot even think about resting. You say I was in a shelter right now, I wouldn't even be able to record this like live stream or my podcast or anything, because basically I would be you go to the shelter, you might get a bed, you might not, and they kick you out and they make you walk around. So if you see people walking around on the corners, they can't be at the shelter. They have to sit somewhere. And so that's why they're sitting on the corner. That's why they're what is in homelessness community, partly it's flying sign. And yes, it is an experience, because we could easily house people. We could give people places to go. That's why I'm so glad that day shelters have become a thing. In fact, I was on the board of our first day shelter in Greensboro, the Interactive Resource Center. Now, people would say, I mean, there were controversies around that, but at the end of the day, to me, and I'm appealing to the faith that many of us share, which is a Christian faith, I'm like, do you really think that it's humane and like Christ to let people just sit outside if they don't want to like starve, freeze to death, just because you don't agree with what they're doing? Like, there's so much weaponized faith in this world right now, as we see with, you know, the North Africa and Southwest Asian region, and that's the way SWANA, Southwest Asia and North Africa, is the preferred terminology now for that region. And just that's why I'm active in speaking up for this movement and this end for, number one, permanent ceasefire, two, restoration. We have destroyed homes. We have destroyed educational institutions. We have destroyed hospitals. And when I say we, I say the country that I live in. And unfortunately, when I can pay my taxes as a business owner that makes hardly no money, paying taxes is rough too. When I can pay taxes, a lot of those taxes that we pay as citizens of the United States of America go to defense things. One of our biggest exports is really just defense, like bombs and like guns and everything else. Is this really the world that we wanted to end up in? Are we really okay with this being a world where we get rid of tent encampments? Because as I told you, the shelter system's not set up for success. At least at your tent, you have a place to go. You know where your tent is, and you have a community of people around your tent. And people have made these tent cities, and they have made that is an urbanism, y'all. And no, it's not is an imperfect urbanism, but some of y'all go to LL Bean and REI and get those tents, and y'all live in them, and y'all are happy to go and like camp in the woods for a week or two or a whole summer. But when it comes time to say, oh, well, we just can't have people living in those tents in the middle of the city, that just makes us look bad. We'll wonder why. And yes, those of us who have the privileges that we do, we have to speak up about that. Something else that's another reason I've kind of moved away. And this was a conversation. Some of you all might have seen me. I zoomed into the CNU conference this year. I won't get into why I decided not to go to Cincinnati on this live, but I really appreciate Elsie Clemens, who is one of the people who is relatively new and has a more grounded idea of place stewardship that is not just about urban form. It's about making sure somebody has somewhere to be. We do need a farm shed. And I also love the one of the concepts that I look being involved in that whole Congress for New Urbanism community over the past almost, I would say, started first Congress is in 11, so about 13, 14 years, is this idea of having designated areas. Because my new motto is we got one earth. You know, I say that every week. I say it on every podcast in my hot topic. We only got one earth. So there are certain things that certain ways we can't live to be sustainable. We are in a climate emergency. We can't just keep drilling for fossil fuels, even drilling for electric vehicles. That's still an unrenewable mineral, and that's what's going on in the Congo. Our dependence on all of our electronic devices, over dependence, constant need to replace our electronic devices, that is making it so that we can't sustain our earth. So yeah, to a measure, we do need to build differently. We do need to be thinking about regenerative agriculture and everything. But we also have the tools we have. It's okay. Like it's great that we have this technology. It's great that we have like tools and ways and means, but using them, making them at the expense of other people, making so many clothes that they're piling up in some countries, and it's basically enslaved labor in other places. That's not going to work out. And those clothes, especially the ones that are just all plastic in landfills, does turn into methane that becomes an issue. Likewise with certain food, if we don't process our food properly, like certain things in the landfills turns into methane, turns into an air quality issue. Viruses like SARS-CoV-2, and just one thing we forget, COVID-19 is a version of SARS. It is a SARS. And those of you who remember the SARS pandemic from the early 2000s know that wasn't anything to play with. And that's why you see me masked in public. Like I'll admit I'm not perfect with it. I'm taking sips, but I'm aware of the risks, and I honor other people's risks. And for the most part, I'm in rooms where more people are being riskier than me. But that's not an excuse to just go willy and nilly and start doing things differently. But these are the things that we are facing. And so what I wanted to express in this week's, like yesterday's email, which many of you are reading this morning, I've noticed, I've been looking at my analytics. I know that a lot of you interact with this live stream as well as interact with my emails on Mondays. I am not leaving the urbanism movement per se, but we got to take it to a different level. Equity is one thing, and everybody's excited that people are listening to Black voices, people are listening to queer voices, people are even listening to disabled voices. But y'all know me. Y'all know I was about that equity talk back in 2010. When I started this platform, that's what it was about in the first place. So, of course, I'm leaning into my visionary work, and I am asking us to move our movement further. I'm asking us to move our movement to land stewardship, to engage with housing first, to engage with what it means to gain land back, and to have a better relationship with those who are land stewards. To me, indigeneity means being a steward of the land as it is. Not that we can't have technology, not that we can't even like use some of the fossil fuels and everything, but we're in overabundance right now. Right now, we could just stop doing it. Kind of like we stopped going places back this time in 2020. We unfortunately, those of us who were not local to Louisville and who were very active as a community, and I'll even admit I wasn't as active as I needed to be in Black feminist circles, did not know the story of Breonna Taylor. But of course, here's the other thing. Many of you all may have been new to Black folks being killed by the police, but I was not. I've been engaged with Black Lives Matter even prior to when the words Black Lives Matter became the rallying call. We have had cases of police brutality almost as long as we've had a police force, or prior to the police force, we had the slave patrols. That is that connection. We've had Black bodies being feared. We've had terrible race science, phrenology, like the experimentation that's created modern gynecology, where a lot of the treatments for us that have wounds and breasts and vaginas, it's terrible. It's just awful. A lot of the treatments that we go through and a lot of the stresses that we go through with those organs. Nevertheless, like we and I'm speaking to those who I've had this voice to and I've been trying to talk to, because to be honest, I'm getting, for the longest time, I love my textile art. I love my music. I don't know enough of my music. In fact, it's my 20th year. I'm going to my 20th reunion for my high school next month, Ragsdale High School, in the class of 2004. I'm looking forward to seeing so many of y'all. And I want to give y'all a special shout out because y'all knew me. Y'all have known me for a very long time, and y'all have known me through some changes. Y'all have known me through some changes, and many of y'all just knowing that y'all are here and supporting me. Some of y'all are elementary classmates. Now I changed schools a little bit, so some of my classmates, high school classmates, are elementary classmates. Some of them are, I knew in high school. Some of my middle school classmates I still consider, my classmates, even y'all graduated from different high schools, but we all got that Greensboro in common. And seeing some of y'all who are doing big things in the world, I'm also proud of y'all too. I'm wanting that big thing money like y'all got. So holler at me, some of my classmates over the years. But y'all, many of them knew me as a repressed child. Many of them were taught by my mom. And having that presence, like both of my parents working for the school system, y'all knew my parents, and it was difficult at times, and cousins and other family members, and being able to grow in that environment and to grow into the person I've become today and having that room to grow. I couldn't do that, but here I was in a movement, especially in the early years when I first got involved, when I moved back to Greensboro the first time in 2009. There was just no room for me to be me and to grow and to thrive and to think for myself. And so, yeah, I needed to move somewhere else. And of course, I love the culture that I grew up in. I love the food. I love the sound of my voice. And I hated it. Y'all know we were taught that we were not to love our sounds of our voices. And I hated it. But now I embrace the sound of my voice. I embrace the things that make me part of the culture that I'm in. And as I sit with and try to reclaim what my ancestors brought when they were brought over, as well as my indigenous ancestors, what they were doing while they were already here, and just this idea of land stewardship, this idea that we were all earthlings, all Homo sapiens. We have different, just like different breeds of animals, not to compare us with animals, but still we have commonalities. We love different breeds of dogs. We love well, maybe so, but we've also tried to racialize dogs out here, which is just not it's not cool. But I think we absolutely to remember that we are all humans, and we've only got that one earth. And one of the things I really want us to do is I want us to think differently about us. Another something I've been saying is that not just getting affordable housing, because of course that assumes that people have to work and that there's a price on housing. Something else I'm going to put up here is a from the American Philosophy Association. The philosophers, y'all, the philosophers want us to guarantee housing. And so the people who are thinking in our minds, who know that, ideas, initiatives, policies start up here, start with what we see, what we listen to, what we expose ourselves to. And that's another reason I'm thankful for any of you all who come by these lives. And of course, I'm actually gonna I've been kind of shortening these lives, so I probably will wrap up in about 15 minutes or so. Just so you're not just seeing me talk, but I appreciate those of you all who come by and listen to me talk, especially, of course, my yarn crew. Got that project in hand, sitting in the cubicles, wherever you are, however you are listening today, however long you listen to it. And if you're on the replay, definitely let me know if you're watching and listening on replay. I appreciate that as well. But yes, I put this link up on the screen, the necessity of guaranteed housing. You're going to hear me talk about guaranteed housing a lot. In fact, I think I will do a deep dive podcast episode about this. So if you are an expert, or if you're somebody who's like, we need to move beyond affordable, but to housing first and guaranteed housing, please reach out on my Calendly link. In fact, I'm going to throw that back up on the screen. It's pinned on Instagram. And I'm putting this here on the screen and it's in the comments. It'll be in the recap email. But if you're happening to run into this recap, or if you are in this space, or if you've been watching me, or if you know me or less, or anybody, reach out to us, because I really I would really love to have an interview with somebody who's thinking like me around housing. I've spent a lot of time and a lot of my career focusing on transportation. Like, I do not want to touch housing. It's like I didn't want to touch gentrification. And part of that is I didn't want to touch housing. I was concerned. I was like, okay, well, folk gonna be who they are, and some of them are gonna be like poop balls. I don't want to get cut off on YouTube, so we're gonna call them poop balls. They're gonna be poop balls, but they don't have to poop next to me as long as they poop somewhere else. And I was definitely a both sider, and everybody is doing their thing, both sides, all sides. We're diversity like that, but I gotta be real with y'all. People gotta have somewhere to lay their head. People gotta have a roof over their head. And that's why if you are on the and I'm pointing to the scroll that's on the horizontal networks, patreon.com/Kristen E. Jeffers, if you want to make a direct monthly pledge, because that's what keeps a roof on my head. And it's patreon.com/Kristen E. Jeffers. Let me fix my scroll here, because some of y'all have been trying to come over here. And yeah, it's patreon.com/Kristen E. Jeffers. Also, let's see. Three. All right, so I'm gonna proudly put these payment links on here. And yes, I want to keep reducing this podcast and attitude, but I also just want to keep a roof over my head. And if you believe also in guaranteed housing and mutual aid, that's something else. Over on my Chris Pattern platform, I have amplified Operation Olive Branch. I lifted them up last week here on this live stream. They have collected about 800 mutual aid accounts, and they're sticking with 800 right now to make sure they all get fully funded. Palestinian families that are actively trying to leave Gaza. Likewise, I often share mutual aid requests from Black, trans, queer, fat people that are in need of getting over this oversized rent, oversized food, oversized child care uh, expenses that we're dealing with here. I talked about Nonprofit Quarterly and how if you haven't been reading Nonprofit Quarterly's work on Black women in the workplace and in social service in nonprofit, you need to. And not just read it, you need to let it soak in. You need to let that cook, you need to let that marinate, because time is up for folks like me. Like, I'm here and I do this. This is something I like to do. I like talking to the camera. I like sharing. It's a gift that I have. It is a gift that I have to share and talk on camera, on lives, on a podcast, reading, like, you've read we read my newsletters. My writing and the speaking is a gift that I love to share, just like my art. My textile art is something I like to do and I like to share sometimes. But, I'll do textiles. I'll talk to people. Before I decided to do these lives and everything, bless her heart, poor Les was listening. My partner she was the main one listening to me talk like this. So I'm doing this now to share, so that she doesn't just have to listen to me process these things in real time. And yeah, I really want us, as those of us in the new urbanist movement, the so-called new urbanist movement, there's so much baggage around that terminology, because what is urbanist and what is new? Sit on that one for a minute. But those who care about that's why we have to center it on, okay, we need land stewardship. We need the transect. So we do need separation of uses, but we don't need the separation of uses we used to have. Now we don't want to go back into warehouses, because that was the early era of the toxic, earth shattering things that kind of led to this era where we're literally drilling into the ground, we're polluting our water, we're full of plastics, we don't get enough rest, we don't get enough time to play, all of that. And so when we reshape our building practices and our policy, because I want to give a shout out to R. John Anderson, who I know he's in kind of the mindset that I'm in, but he often brings up that, yes, as a constructor, as someone who's built, and I know my dad, if he was living, would give me the same perspective. They're both licensed electricians, so I want to shout that, that the electrical mind is influencing me today. People like contractors who work with electricity, bless them, because that is something that can kill you on the spot. My dad did not die by being shocked, but he was electrocuted once, and he survived being electrocuted when I was 3 years old back in the 80s. Yeah, so don't play with our electrical contractors, y'all, and don't play with electricity. Like, if you want to do the DIY stuff, if you're gonna hire somebody, hire that person to get your home abated from mold, asbestos, mildew. Do not play with air quality. It will come back to bite you. And don't play with your electrical and gas systems. We've seen a lot of houses blow up. We've seen a lot of people have electrical fires. Don't play with any of that. Don't play with your water either. That's not. And so we have made it so, and of course that was not the vision of the CNU founders. The CNU founders are like, okay, let's advance the change. Football terminology coming out here. Let's get people that matter, the government who is making these policies. Let's really emphasize that we need to stop building single family on acreage that people aren't using. We're not saying that people are taking this little acreage and they're creating their little homesteads. These are folks that are just building big houses just to have big houses, just to say, hey, I got a big house in the suburbs. I got my little fiefdom, my kingdom. I'm living large. I'm the person. More like I'm the man. But I'm trying to, some people are like, I'm the person. I'm the woman. Not that. But people who are doing this in order to have resources and building closer together and rebuilding streetcars. Like, I think about all of the streetcar infrastructure that was ripped out of cities and how if we had built right on that and how if we had maintained that, how that we wouldn't have had this trouble because so many people wouldn't have had to get cars. I have a car because I need one. Not necessarily that I want one, especially the cost of insuring, parking, maintenance. But I could get rid of all of it. I'm getting back on my bike. And bike world, y'all got something to think about too. I'm glad to see. I'm actually I'm considering becoming LCI certified again. So I'm looking into that resource and looking into what that looks like here. And I'm very pleased to see that there's been care to make sure that there's diversity, equity, and inclusion. But mobility justice goes beyond that. It's centering and starting with, okay, what does everybody need to do well? What do disabled folks need to be able to be mobile? And that is where the sidewalks come in, because you got to wheel your wheelchairs. Like, we need the sidewalks for that. We need the bike paths. We need all of those things. So there are absolutely things we need. And to go back to financing, what I was talking about when I brought up the electrician's mind, we need the financing. And that financing is coming from two places right now. It is coming from governments deciding that that's what they want to invest in. Take all that bond money away and put it back into housing. I would much rather see the Pentagon's money being moved over to HUD, EPA, all the other agencies, like agencies that actually are in DC, other than the FBI. The FBI can just go away. We don't need you. Stop surveilling us. Stop being threatened by us. Stop being threatened by me. Sorry, you're getting played out here. Take that money out of prisons, take that money out of defense, and put it back into domestic policy. And that's just on the government tip. And a lot of us would feel more comfortable with this being a democracy. But that's the thing, it ain't no democracy. It's an oligarchy out here. And it being an oligarchy out here means that private money is so much more of a thing going on with us than is even government money. Like Amazon, yeah, they've got in the cities that they have a major presence in, they do have a housing production, fine, but it's still limited. And yes, it's guaranteed affordable housing, but not a lot of housing is out here for just 0%. And what if we got rid of having to pay rent? And what if we got rid of mortgages? Like, we paid enough to build the buildings. Like, say you want to live in an apartment or like a condo building, and so you pull all your money together. And so there is a secondary market. Like, we don't completely get rid of the realtor system, but we really do think about how we want to give out housing, how we want to share housing. And in fact, this is a paywalled link, and that's just one of the last things I'm going to leave you with today. I'm going to try to pull up that City Lab. Oh, great. In fact, HUD actually has a report on Vienna's unique social housing program. It is past paywall. So, gosh, if only we could take some of that money that we are spending on the in this HUD program that is studying Vienna's social housing program. So, I don't know if the person who did this is listening today, or somebody who worked with this. So yet again, just like I linked to last week, annual median income, so you can understand how affordable housing is calculated in this country under current funding limits. But in Vienna, you get a house. You get a house at your income level. And then if you want to upgrade, then you get to upgrade. Nobody's stopping you from upgrading. There is a private market for upgrades, but there's so many people. But we take housing. Housing's not an option. There's other things. There's other ways you can play with your money. I'm gonna link to Ramit Sethi's work. You may have seen him on Netflix, and you may have seen him in his work. In fact, he's so prominent. You can just Google Ramit. And it's about rethinking the American dream and thinking about, if those of you play with the stock market and play with investments, and actually it's not a bad idea, but sometimes That's something I'm going to be exploring more and exploring more of the ethical ways to do that, because there's some ethics issues in the stock market right now. In fact, the stock market was built, one of those other institutions in America, built on the backs of my body or at least my ancestors' bodies being chattel slaves and our value as chattel slaves. So, but this is also another way to of self reparation. Well, actually, reparation is something that has to happen to you, but I'll say self economic restoration. Like, until reparations come, which that person who left a comment, so what, on my YouTube, if you watch the full video version of our podcast, so what? So what? Why do you care so much about how people spend money? It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. They got us. They might have you thinking that there's a morality in how people spend money, and there is morality, but that's not the morality that we need to be sticking on. But if you are considering, like, definitely read up his work, Ramit's work on instead of us investing, well, yes, obviously invest in a home, because in the current system, yes, investing in a home, especially if you're a marginalized community, that gives you a measure of security, or at least the appearance of security. But that depends on your metro area. That depends on your loan servicer. That depends on you having a job. All of this depends on you having income that you work for. And we have a disability system that underpays you. If you haven't already, go to the Social Security website and see what your Social Security, like, if you had to take disability right now, go and see what your Social Security would be. I've done it. And I actually have that paperwork printed, and I have the number. And yes, if I went on disability right now, it would give me a guaranteed income of about $1,000 a month, because it all depends on whether or not if you've ever paid into Social Security. But take a look at that. And I think I'll leave on that front, because you might want to take a hard look at that, and you might want to think about how others, if you've never worked in a W-2 job, right now there's so many jobs that are just 1099, and you may or may not have to pay your taxes. You may not even, there's so many things, far too much. And that's why I love coming to y'all on Mondays. And please, please, please bring your questions. Last week we had questions, which is great. Other weeks, I'll just be on here chatting with you for about an hour or so. What's on my mind, and what's been on my mind this week is really guaranteed housing. Guaranteed housing. And I'm glad to see that someone in our U.S. federal government has studied other housing options. We need them. Public housing should have never become a stain on our record. We should guarantee people housing. That is the one thing I want y'all to remember. If you're coming in late, or if you stayed the whole time, or if you're listening to the whole thing, I want us to start guaranteeing housing. And for my policy heads out there, for my money heads out there, I want us to start thinking about how we do that, and how we pay those who need to build that housing, because we need more of it. We do need more of it. But what if we did an inventory of all the housing units we have across the country, surveyed people, asked them if they wanted to move around. They wanted to move around. Got everybody in position where they wanted to be. Then we talked about, okay, what do you want to do for a living? What if we did that? So chew on that, think on that. So once again, I'm Kristen Jeffers. For those of you who are joining in and who have never seen my work before, I'm Kristen Jeffers. I show up in the world as like a citizen journalist, urban planner. I'm also a textile artist. I'm originally from Greensboro, North Carolina. I live in Washington, D.C. now. And I come to you. I have a podcast, Defying Gentrification. It is available on all podcast platforms. So I would love, love, love right now for you to listen to it on YouTube or YouTube Music, as I would love to be able to get that monetized. For that to become, until we can get guaranteed housing, you can get me guaranteed income by doing a multitude of things. Guaranteed income by making a monthly pledge on my Patreon. Some of you have been patrons before. I'm actively doing this thing now. I'm going to be doing this for the long haul. So please, please do subscribe to me on Patreon. Do consider re-upping your pledges. It is going to a good place. It's going to a righteous place. I appreciate all of you all who stayed patrons over the years, even when you haven't understood the direction we're going. Thank you for that. I also have my Venmo. If you want to drop me a little something right now, Kristen-Jeffers-3 on Venmo. I'm on some of the other platforms, but Venmo is the one I use the most, and it's the easiest for me to get right to. Hire me. I'm gonna my Calendly link is pinned on the Instagram version of this, and I'm also gonna throw that Calendly link back up here. So this is the one: panels, work projects, teams. I still do all that stuff. But I do want to evaluate what it entails, especially because now you understand: is this a guaranteed housing project? Are we working for public transit? Are we thinking about like guaranteed income for people? If it's not a radically rooted planning project, I don't want to deal with it. I'm gonna just be frank with y'all. Y'all been wondering. I'm gonna just blatantly say it. It needs to have a radical mind to it. It needs to be fixing an issue. It needs to be a true solution, not a band-aid or a piece. So if that's you and what you're doing, I would love to hear more about what you're doing, and I am open for work. So book me when you go to calendly.com/Kristen E. Jeffers. You can book me and we can talk about what that entails, with the expectation that we're going to do more stuff. Now, if you just want a one-on-one hour with me, book my career, life, or business coaching. My hourly rate right now is $250, but you pay that $250, and I'm gonna make sure that you know the direction you need to go next. And it'll be a mentor and a friend. If this is cost prohibitive, find someone. Like, this is a great gift for the graduates in your life. This is a wonderful gift for the graduates in your life, of every level: high school, college, grad school, all of those things. And then if you do want that, and we need to arrange a payment plan for the $250, but you need this coaching, reach out to me. Book the other session, or just book a one-on-one Defying Gentrification one-on-one. We can talk possibly putting you on my podcast if you have a project, if you want to share what's going on with you, if you have a book that's relevant. Also, if you do have books, make sure you send me your review copies so that I can read them. I'm reading the review copy of the next interview I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet. You got to see it this coming Friday, but it's going to be wonderful. We've been trying to arrange this interview for weeks, so that's exciting, and I'm looking forward to that. And with that, I'm leaving live. You can always find me here, and those are the financials. I've talked about how you can support me and everything. Thank y'all so much for being here this Monday. Happy Monday to you, whatever time zone you're in. To my UK folks who are ending your day, to my Australians who are definitely ending your day. If you are up late with me streaming on here, I appreciate you. To my Aoterra and my Australia family, I appreciate y'all. Thank you. To my time zones, to my US, Mexico, Canada, Brazil time zones, to my Duolingo folks, because the Espanol is más mayor than it used to be. And y'all saw if y'all were on my Facebook, on my personal Facebook, you saw my little block where I put my little Spanglish block up there. So maybe one day soon, I will be bringing some of these to y'all in some other languages, and I'll be traveling. And yes, live shows. This is another place. If you want me to come and do this show live, and you have a venue that can accommodate me and my air quality needs, I would love to talk to you. Book one of those Defying Gentrification one-on-ones on that. Remember, this is me kind of doing my Oprah thing. I would love to just talk to you about where you're from, where you live, what you need and where you live. This is a show not just for urban planners and architects and practitioners. This is for everybody who wants to talk and think with me about where they live and how the culture is shaped. So with that, I said I was going to log off before, but I'm pushing the X now on Instagram. So farewell to my Instagram friends. And farewell to all of y'all. Have a wonderful week. And as I like to say on every other thing, do what you can to end and defy gentrification. Until next time.